Hey guys, Daniel Mar Reviews here, and in this video, we're going to be talking about if the iPhone 6s is still a good phone in 2020. So, first thing we're going to get into is just the physical appearance of the phone. So as you can see, it has an aluminum back right there. There's the screen, you have the Touch ID button right there. On the bottom, you have the speakers, you have a headphone jack, the last iPhone to come with a headphone jack, and you have the lightning port. Right here, as you can see, you get the volume buttons right there. It has the mute switch as well right here, which this is the last iPhone to come with that. Of course, on this side you have the on-off switch. We have a 12 megapixel camera right here that can do 4K, which is decent in 2020. There's a lot better cameras in smartphones right now. Here's 4K at 30. Definitely doesn't feel 4K, honestly. But I'm guessing that's just because of the screen. And we have a 5 megapixel camera on the front, which can do 720p, which is definitely not the greatest. And here's the front-facing camera, which I'd say is pretty good. Definitely not the best compared to newer smartphones, but I'd say for 2015 this was pretty good quality. So now we're going to talk about the display. This right here has a 1334 by 750 display at 326 pixels per inch, so it's definitely a pretty good display. Definitely not the best for 2020. For 2015 this was pretty decent, but for 2020 there are definitely much better displays. But this is a 5-year-old phone and it's still doable, and I would say it's still a pretty good display for 2020. Again, not the best, but definitely nowhere near the worst. On the inside, this thing has a dual-core A9 chip that's clocked at 1.85 gigahertz with 2 gigabytes of RAM. So that's definitely not the best processor, obviously, but for 2015, this was pretty powerful. And even using it right now, I still find iOS 13 runs pretty smooth. So the single core is 554 and the multi-core is 1029, and that certainly lacks compared to newer smartphones. When running iOS 13, it still works fairly smooth, so you're not really going to have any problems with the A9 chip, at least for now. With this, I'd say that the A9 chip is a pretty good chip. Nowhere near as powerful as any new smartphone. Even just maybe like 3 years ago, this might have been considered okay at best. So opening like the Photos app and the Camera app, with the A9 chip on iOS 13, it's pretty smooth. Same thing with the Calculator app. These are not intense apps, so obviously these are going to be pretty quick to open and pretty smooth. But then when you get to more intensive apps like LumaFusion, you definitely notice it takes a while to load. Same thing with Photoshop Mix. It's a more intense app, so it'll take a while to load. It definitely feels a little bit slower, but it's still a pretty good chip, a decent chip, if you're going to buy this as a budget option phone. This battery is a 1750 milliamp battery, and one thing I can tell you about that is the battery life on here absolutely sucks, and that's one of the things that really sucks about this phone is the battery life. Not to mention, sometimes when you're going onto an app or something, it just turns off, and it doesn't matter the percentage. Honestly, the battery life on this thing really sucks. I mean, it's mediocre at best. It's doable, but it really does suck, honestly. So yeah, I would definitely say if you want a really budget phone with good battery life, this is definitely not what you want to go to. That said, it does work. This is running iOS 13.5, and I could definitely say that it works pretty well on the iPhone 6s. I'm actually shocked, honestly. And the A9 chip, as I said earlier, seems to actually do a pretty good job. I mean, there are a couple things that are slow. If we open a game like Crossy Road, I mean, it takes a little longer to load. That's the only thing on this phone is the loading times. But overall, it runs really smooth. Overall, I would say that it still works pretty good. This is actually rumored to get iOS 14. So if that's the case, and that kind of makes you wonder, is it still worth it in 2020? If you can find a refurbished one and you plan on using it as a short-term phone, then yes, I would definitely recommend this. But it's not guaranteed to get iOS 14, and chances are on iOS 14 it actually might run pretty good, but there's also the chances that it might run pretty slow. So honestly, I think if you're going to use it short-term and you want a budget option, then I would say that the iPhone 6s is a pretty good phone. But there's definitely other phones in the market right now, not just from Apple, but any company, that I honestly think would probably be a little bit more worth it. Like, you'd probably be better off buying a used iPhone 7. I mean, hey, this is the last iPhone with a headphone jack, so if you want the headphone jack and you want the iOS experience, then yeah, this is probably the best phone you can get, because it's the only iPhone with a headphone jack that's running the latest version of iOS. Not to mention it also has the mute switch as well. So if you're looking for a budget option for short term, then yes, go for this. But in the long term, then you might want to go for an iPhone 7 or an iPhone 8, because, you know, they are a little bit more updated. They're probably going to get an extra year of support. So overall, this is my review on the iPhone 6s. In my personal experience, it's still a pretty good phone. I only plan on upgrading it once the OS stops getting updated. So I plan on definitely keeping this until the end of iOS 14 if it gets updated to there. Anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. That's it. See you guys.